All right, so hello and welcome again to INF360, programming in Python. This course is designed to get you an introduction to Python itself as a programming language, and it's written as an introductory course. So we're going to take you as if you know nothing and get you situated within Python all the way up to building object-oriented programming. This course is fairly relaxed, I would say, in that the time schedule, there's a lot of extra time during a normal 16-week session. So use that to your advantage, take advantage of that, rewrite your projects, etc. We'll get into more detail on those. But if you have any questions during the virtual sections here, as I'm recording for all sections, both online and on campus. If you guys have any additional questions or something you want me to cover, you can always email me. We are going to go on the Monday and Wednesday, like I said, down here with the Zoom link. The course says that we are scheduled to meet on Fridays. However, typically we don't meet on Fridays. So you'll want to pay attention to the announcements if there's a reason for us to meet on a Friday. If something happens on a Monday or Wednesday and I can't get the recording in or something in between there, you'll always see that in the announcements, which is one of the biggest points in this class. Make sure you follow the announcements. I'll always make sure to have it send an email to you guys, and that way you guys are aware. But all communication, because of our current status and we're not on campus, the best way to get mass information out is going to be through those announcements. Which also leads to contacting me. If at any time you guys have any questions or issues or something like that in the class, you feel like you're not going to make an assignment due date, whatever it is, email me. I'm pretty good about answering email all hours of the day as long as my phone is near me, kind of thing. So if you send me an email, I will definitely get a response to you. If in the weird case that you don't hear from me within 24 hours, then go ahead and send another email and kind of pester me in that way. It's pretty rare that would happen. So to get started up here at the top, there's a couple things I want to get covered today. Do know that all of the sessions that we do on Monday and Wednesday are going to be recorded, and then they'll be posted into the actual session of that week. If in the event one of the videos doesn't get recorded correctly, there's issues with it, I have all the recordings that I do from every semester. So I don't reuse the recordings from every semester. I just keep them as a backup in the event something fails or the video doesn't record or something else happens. So I try to give you guys a fresh recording every single time. For this up here at the top, we're going to have our syllabus to get started. So let's start there. So as you can see, again, looks like I need to update the year there, but we are going to meet from 9:30 to about 10:30 roughly in here. I know you guys have class. It takes about 50 minutes for each section. That's about the way I've timed it. So even if this was a Tuesday, Thursday class, we would only time it around 50 minutes. I leave that extra time, including times like Friday, where if you want to schedule a one-on-one or you have questions during this normally scheduled time, that you're welcome to email me, and I'd be happy to do a Zoom session, either global if there's a bunch of people with questions, or if it's you just want a one-on-one during that. It doesn't have to be during that class time, but that's what I kind of reserve that Friday for, as students are going to learn Python at all different levels. All right. So getting down here to the basics, you're going to have the course schedule that's down here below. The main things to look at in the course schedule, week 1, you're going to get through all these introductions right up to our midterm, and our midterm will come in right around week 7. And then you're going to have 2 weeks to work on your midterm project. Depending on how that falls with spring break, generally, if I timed it correctly, that usually means that you're going to have about 2 to 3 weeks to work on this midterm project. We'll talk about the midterm project in more detail here in a little bit, but the idea in this class, when we look at the grade breakdown, is primarily your grade is going to come from your midterm project and your final project. The midterm project itself, it can be anything that you want it to be, and you'll notice as you go through and start doing assignments in this class that I give you the rough idea of what I want to see in your project, but I don't tell you what project to do specifically. Some students like that. Some students hate that. They want to be told what they're going to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. And there's a reason for that. In Python, if you are using this as a language out in the field, typically you're going to have other departments come to you asking you what you would do for this kind of code. In other words, they're going to give you general requirements that they need, and then it's up to you to actually come up with the implement the code. You're not going to have somebody from another department tell you how to code. Now, obviously, everybody taking this class is not looking to become a Python programmer for their career. There may be one or two, but not everybody's in here. This is such a broad course that I'm catching students from computer networking, cybersecurity, computer science, journalism, informatics, or I'm sorry, physics, and other sciences, biosciences as well. They're all taking this course. And the reason is Python is one of the biggest languages that's out there today. So back in the day when Perl was king, you had PHP that was king. Today, Python is king. It's easy to read. It's easy to write. And people can understand it better. And there's a large library of scripts and things out there now that we have sources like GitHub, etc. So learning Python, I don't care if you're a computer networker or computer science guy, especially people like computer networkers. I was one back in the day. It was, why do I need to learn code? I need to learn my CLI and my programming interface. And that isn't the way things are programmed now, especially with things changing. You have software-defined networks. In cybersecurity, we have to write scripts to do things faster and easier. And that's ultimately how I got into Python to begin with, was the fact that Python was so easy to use, and I used it to automate my daily life when I was in my old job as a engineer. So I could use Python to automate things that I didn't have time to deal with. And once I wrote a good enough code, it did just that for me. I could go and do something else. So you may find a very good reason for that to work. The other one, when we talk about web scraping and things like that, that may be a very useful tool for you for scraping web pages as a journalism student. If you want to get a bunch of information in a hurry, that's a great way to do it. Same way with you guys in the science fields. You may use things like NumPy, SciPy, which are additional packages in Python that allow you to work with numbers and scientific features and research, etc. So I won't dive too much into that, but that's what our midterm project is. It's wide open. You'll get some, general idea of what you will have in terms of requirements and a rubric. But typically you won't want to start working on this midterm project until after this this midterm exam. And the idea is that everything up to this point, you'll start to see those as requirements on this midterm project. If you try to work on it too early and you're not really versed yet, you're going to be missing key points in that midterm project. So don't worry about it. You have 3 weeks to work on it. Trust me, that is a lot of time. I just got done teaching the intercession course, which only had 3 weeks to do this entire course. So they had 2 days to do their midterm project, not 3 weeks. All right, as we move down through the schedule, you're going to see week 10 all the way through to week 14. By week 14, you're going to be working on the final project. So the way that works is you do your midterm project, you submit it to me on Blackboard, I grade it, give you a bunch of feedback in between there, and then you make the changes and the fixes of everything that you saw in the feedback. You then add the additional requirements that you learn over weeks 10 through 13. And then for the final project, you have it expanded your midterm project. A lot of students sometimes want to go and do 2 different projects. I strongly recommend that you don't do that. Stick with one project, get the updates that come out of it. I'll help you find a way to make it work. I have no problem doing that. But those students that want to do 2 different projects, the problem there is one, I give you points back on your midterm project if you fix them in the final project. So a lot of times people will get their midterm project back and it's a really low score. That's okay because you have a chance to get all of those points back if you fix it in your final project. So don't be stressed in getting a bad score on your midterm project, especially if there's ways to fix it in beside of there. And I'll give you tons of feedback in that regard. The final project, you'll patch all those up, you'll add the extra features, and then by week 14 and week 15, and you'll see it in the calendar there on the due dates, when we get closer to the final project, I schedule one-on-one meetings with every single student. So as you are done with your final project, you can schedule that one-on-one meeting. I grade your final project live in that meeting with you. We grade any remaining homework that needs to be graded during that time. If you had late assignments, etc., we grade all of that. And then by the end of that meeting, you have a chance to fix things on your final project. So we'll talk through your project and work through it. If there's some bugs or some issues, we'll talk about it. I'll quiz you a little bit over it. That actually counts as your quote final exam, as it's listed here. There is no final written exam. It's an oral exam that I perform during the meeting itself. And it's not like question one, here's this. It's questions about your project and your assignment. I do this for two reasons. One, it helps me understand that it's your assignment and somebody else didn't write it for you. If I start asking questions about your assignment and you don't have any idea, I know it's not your assignment or your project. It also helps me ask specific questions based around your project, so you actually learn a little bit more on that. This process has worked extremely well for the last several years. Every student that's ever scheduled that meeting has always appreciated that meeting. And so that's the reason I keep doing it. I get direct student feedback every single semester as to whether or not they like this. Was it worth it? Those that were, apprehensive about scheduling meetings, etc., didn't want me to tear apart their project, so to speak. That's not what happens during that meeting at all. And they were really glad that they actually took the time to schedule it. And in the last 4 years, I've only had one student that refused to schedule that meeting. If for some reason you refuse to schedule that meeting, just realize I'm going to grade your project as is, which means you have no chance to fix anything. So if you didn't fix anything that you needed on the final project, which means you may not get points at the midterm project, your grade is just final at that point in time. So schedule the meeting. During that time of the meetings, and I'll put more information out this way at the end of the semester when we get there, but I like to give people an idea of this at the very beginning. When I go to schedule the meeting, it's a 30-minute meeting. It's not a long meeting, and you are able to tell me when you want to schedule it. And that usually means that I'm not just here during 8 to 5. I'll list the hours that are there, and you guys pick those dates. We confirm them and schedule a meeting. I do go over the gap of the weekend. So my virtual students who are also taking this course and, may have an 8 to 5 job kind of thing or odd hours, there's still a time that we can meet over the course of that weekend if we have to, if you don't have a time during the weekdays. All right, so we'll wrap that up, and that leads us into week 16. That's what these last 3 weeks are all about, is really just kind of wrapping that up. So during finals week, I will just be finishing up the last few meetings. So you'll work on your final project week 15, starting week 14, I'm sorry. Starting week 15 is when I'll start scheduling the one-on-one meetings on through finals week. And then there'll be a cutoff date there on finals week to make sure that I have time to finish everything else up. As we look at the assessments and what the grading scale for this would be, so assignments are going to combine this has changed this semester. So assignments are now worth 15% of your grade. The quizzes, there will be 3 of those throughout the semester. Those are worth 20% of your grade. Your midterm project is 20. Your midterm exam is going to be worth 25. And your final project is worth 20. So you definitely want to make sure you get these midterm and final projects in. That's 40% of your grade. Anybody have any questions over that syllabus that's live here? Okay. So next section is where I talk about assignments. So all assignments that are in this class, and there isn't a whole lot of assignments in this class, but those that are there are always due on midnight at Sunday before the next week. So for example, homework 1 that's this week, it's due Sunday at midnight, and that's Central Time. And then you'll be able to send that all the way through. If for some reason you can't make that date, email me. Don't just submit something wildly or say you couldn't get to it, etc. Just email me, please. Just email me. The number one thing I want to stress this semester is, as you're doing the homework assignments, as you're doing your midterm projects, do not cheat on any one of these assignments, which means do not go out to the internet, find code, copy and paste it in there, and say it's your own or do slight modifications. I want you to do your work in this class. I'll be quite frank, cheating was running rampant last semester with COVID and everything else in there. There's about 8 students that I should have submitted to the college board in order for academic review. I didn't do that. And then finding that in multiple other classes, I regret that decision. So this semester, I have zero tolerance for anything that's copy and pasted off the internet. Trust me, you don't want to do it. These students went out, found an answer to one of the assignments I had, copied and pasted it in, and there was about 8 of them that did this. And on top of that, it was the wrong answer. So the project or the answer that they found on Stack Overflow, etc., they pasted it in there directly as if it was their own, and it wasn't even the right answer. So please, please, please don't do that. Their number one excuse was I didn't have time. You guys are all in college now. I'm going to treat you like adults. Normally, I gave them a warning, gave them a 0 on that. I'm not even doing that this semester. If I find any evidence whatsoever that it was copied and pasted off the internet, I will not have any tolerance with it. I'm sorry. I just can't do it as an instructor. So on your assignments, do your own work. I would rather you do your own work and you not quite get it right and give me a chance to help you with it, but at least it's your work. And trust me, I am way more lenient with students that do their own work than those that do not. With your assignments, at the top of every single assignment, I want you to copy and paste these in here in the initial comments. I have to stress this every single semester because somebody always forgets this. It's like putting your name on an assignment. Once again, you're all in college. You're all adults now, whether you like it or not. Put your name on your paper. Make sure when you copy and paste this in that this is your name. So here's an example. Do not use this one. You are not Jason Zeller. I am Jason Zeller. So please do not put Jason Zeller. It seems minuscule and annoying, but trust me, I have over 75 students for this class that I have to grade. If you don't put these comments up there, I don't know who you are. The other part of that is the file name. Make sure that you file or do it in this format. So for example, student, and then so your first name, last name, and then whatever the assignment is. Make sure it's in this format. Please don't add underscores. Please don't add a bunch of other characters in there, etc. Just put your first name, last name, and the assignment that it is. So assignment 1, assignment 2, assignment 3, midterm project, final project, etc. Please name it that way. If you don't, and everybody just calls it assignment1.py, then I end up with 75 assignment 1.pies and the code ends up breaking on my side. I have to do a lot of extra work to grade. Please do not do that. Just name these files. It's really simple, but every semester I have students that can't get this part for whatever reason. So please do that. You'll notice in everything that I do in this class, if you see something underlined and bolded like this, I'm basically looking you in the eye and shouting at you, pay attention to this part. If you were in the physical classroom, that is what that means. So whether that is in the PowerPoint slides that are coming for the midterm exam, et cetera, we'll talk about that. If it's bold and underlined, pay attention to it because trust me, you're going to see it again. Let's see here. That covers all the assignments. Anybody have any questions over assignments? One last piece on assignments as you're working in this course. If you have an issue with a Python file and you want me to take a look at it, please zip that file before you send it to me. Our Outlook system here at Fort Hays will block any .py Python files. So if you send something to me and want me to take a look at it and don't zip it first, it will cause an issue. Just zip it to me, send it, and then I can look at it and see what's going on. When your Blackboard assignments, please submit them as the raw Py files. Do not zip those unless you get to your midterm project and final project, and it requires you zip those. But for your normal homework assignments, there should be no reason for you to need a zip file. Okay, I think that covers all the assignments. If anything else comes up, we'll put it in the announcements. So session recordings again. So when you come into each one of these sections, you're going to see something like this. You're going to see the link. Everything in here in terms of written material is the automatetheboringstuff.com. The reason I use this book is, one, it's a very good open source book, which means there's zero cost to this course for everybody that takes it. I don't see a reason. If you want to go purchase the actual physical book, you're more than welcome to do that if you're a better learner in that regard. But all the materials here are directly taken from this website. And so if you can read through this material as we go through, then what happens is I come in on your particularly on Mondays, is when I come through and we will pull the highlights out of what I really want you to understand and learn through here. So having read it beforehand is a good idea, but I'll pull the key points that I want you to understand and learn in here and talk about them on a Monday. On Wednesday, we will talk a little bit more about those and then potentially back into the homework assignment. So usually it's set up to be a 2-day a week course, not a 3-day a week course. And that's why we don't meet on Fridays. All right. So you'll go through this. One thing to pay attention to is I do use the second edition of this book now. I think I've updated all the links in the Blackboard shell to use the second edition. Just make sure that you're using the second one as you're reading through here. So you'll click on these chapters, you'll read through this material. It will get you an idea of what's going on here. A couple of key things I want you to point out. It's going to have you go ahead and install Python. It's obviously the first thing we need to do in order to get working on this. So working with Python itself, right here, it's talking about how to download and install Python. If you have Python on your machine, so if you're using a Mac or something like that, be sure to leave your underlying existing one in there. But what I want you to do is make sure you remove any old versions. So I'm going to remove this just for the sake of showing you how to remove things. Come in here, hit uninstall, and uninstall whatever. Now this version, the 391, is actually the one we're going to use, but I'm going to do a fresh install for a reason to show you how to install Python here. So while that's removing, if we look back here, we want to do the Python 391 install. So we click on this python.org and downloads. And we'll click on this link here. This link will more than likely update throughout the semester. They tend to do a lot of releases. So for here on out, just make sure you're in this Python 391. Whether you're using Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever, there's always different variations set up and ready for you to go. If you click the download, for the most part, the browser is going to figure out exactly which one you want. And so it's going to download and run it for you. This one is going through and uninstalling. For the most part, you're going to want the 64-bit version of Python here, not the 32-bit version, as most machines today are going to be the 64-bit flavor. Okay, so now that that's down, give me just a second here, and I will click on the downloaded version of that I downloaded from clicking here on the download link. And I strongly recommend you guys do this. Now, if you guys are normal Python coders, etc., just make sure that you're running version 391. So you can install multiple versions of Python. Just make sure you're using the 391 version for this course. In this course, we are going to use idle, which is the command line interpreter and the IDE, so to speak, of what we're going to use for this course. If you choose to use other IDEs, you're more than welcome to. Just know that I'm only going to show idle on the screen here when I do my recordings. That is because it's free, it's included with Python, and everybody can use it. So it's kind of the common ground. If you're on a Mac and you want to use Xcode, or you want to get fancy and use PyCharm, etc., that's fine. Again, just make sure that I'm going to be showing you idle. When you get to this screen here, don't click install now until you click this add Python 3.9 to path. This is the #1 mistake that students do when they come in and try to install Python. They forget to do this. If you forget to do this later on down the road, when we go to install modules, you're going to have a bunch of issues. There's some ways to fix it, but quite frankly, the easiest and cleanest way to fix it is just uninstall Python, come back to this launcher, click that little checkbox. Once you click that, you can hit install now, and it will go ahead and install for you. I know it seems like a super simple process, but I do get some students every semester that get hung up on this section. Now, if you read automate the boring stuff, they're going to ask you to use mu. I do not repeat, do not want you to use Mu. Mu is a great little IDE, and it's kind of flexible, and it does some things. It's great when you're working on integrated stuff like CircuitPython with Adafruit, and you're doing little microcontrollers and stuff like that. I don't want you to use Mu in this class. There's some variants and issues in there, and so I'd really rather you use idle for everything that we're going to do. The book will follow along with idle. It'll also give you examples in Mu. We're going to follow the idle examples. All right, so once this is done, it's installed. You can usually go to your start menu and type idle. Oops, there we go, and you'll get something that looks like this. Once you run this on the 64-bit version, this is your idle shell. Now, this is your interactive shell, which means I can do different things of Python in here. And as you read through the material, it'll show you. So I can do simple math things like 2 plus 2, and I'm going to get back 4. I can do print statements. I can say like print hello world, etc., and I'm going to get that information back. So this is your interactive shell. When you guys are working on your homework assignments, I do not want you to submit this stuff here. On your homework assignments, you're going to go to File, New File. This is your Python script file. This is what you're going to end up submitting to me. So every time you get a homework assignment, say for example, assignment 1, we're just going to cover an introduction today. Let's see here. Let me go back. Learning modules. Okay, so it'll eventually talk about assignment 1 here. So for each assignment, what we're going to do is we're going to come back here to this. We're going to copy and paste this in. You just copy it, paste it right at the top. It should always be the first thing in your document. Obviously, we need to fix this. You're going to put your name. So not my name, but whatever your name is, and then fix this assignment. So assignment 1, assignment 2, 3, midterm, final project, always put this at the top. I will eventually start counting off points if these comments aren't at the top, so please do it. We'll talk a little bit more about comments. If you use the pound sign, then anything after that is considered a comment, which means it's not going to execute that code. But I do this right off the bat so you guys can get this in here. Eventually, it's a good habit if you're working on assignments to come down here in assignment 1, and you're going to see what's required here in assignment 1. It's a good idea to just copy all this, come back to your assignment, and paste it in here. Then if you highlight all of this, go to Format, Comment Out Region. It's going to go ahead and comment this out. This way, when I'm working on this assignment, I don't have to flip back and forth to Blackboard to make sure I have all my requirements. They're all pasted right here at the top. All I have to do is make sure I got them, and then once I know that they're done, I can either remove them out of here if I want to, or just show that they're done in some form or way. So I recommend new students that are trying to get familiar going through assignments, this is how they go through and do it. Anybody have any questions on how you would do assignments like this? Okay. At this point, you would just go File, Save. Then you would save this file wherever you want. And I recommend you make a folder somewhere for this class where you can keep all your files together. It will save out as a .py file, and that is what I would end up submitting here on this homework assignment. If I click assignment 1, and down here, browse for local file, find that .py file and hit submit. Again, please use the .py file as it says here. Do not use this output here. This interactive shell is great for testing little lines of code and getting immediate feedback without having to run your code. We'll talk a little bit more about assignment 1 when we go over that kind of stuff and how to work within idle, etc. I'm just doing a high overview of the course right now. Anybody have any questions over idle or Python? Again, don't be afraid to speak up, talk, send me a chat, whatever you want to do. Okay. So introduction here, please read through this material. It's going to give you a basis of Python and things like that. There are a couple questions on a quiz out of here, so go ahead and read it. and make sure that you got everything there. The key piece out of chapter 0 is getting Python installed. That's what I want you to do. So make sure you get this, make sure you click that checkbox for the path and get everything up and running. Now, chapter 1 is going to talk about basics. We'll pull that up here. So the basics in Python is that interactive shell. So again, they're talking about mu here, but we're going to use idle in this course because it is much easier for people to use. So if I just type in idle, I will get this shell. I can follow along with exactly what it's talking about here. So as it mentioned, we're going to be able to type in commands or expressions. Everything you type into a Python shell is called an expression. So for example, if we do 2 + 2, that's an expression that it gets evaluated down to 4 inside of here. When you use this, there's a bunch of math operators. So the most basic form of doing things in Python is just some simple math. As you're going through and doing this math, you have this operator table. So most of you are familiar with this with math over the years. It does use a order of operations or precedence. So if you use parentheses, it's going to do that. Just your standard math operations that you're all used to at this point in your career. So if I do 2 + 3 × 6, it's going to do 3 × 6 first. Then we're going to add 2, which ends up giving us 20. You can practice all of these over here on this interactive shell and get an idea of what's going on there. It is good to keep nice, clean spacing inside of here. So even though I can do 2 + 2, you're still going to get evaluated, but it's better to go 2 + 2 with some spacing in there so you can see what's going on. The white space itself is going to get ignored for Python unless it's at the beginning of a line. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about functions and such. So in Python, you have several different data types. And the first ones that we're going to work with are called integers, floating point numbers, and strings. So integers are whole numbers. You can think of them as -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Floating point is going to have a period and then some additional number of strings after that. So you're doing a more detailed number. And then strings themselves are going to be usually text in some form, and it's alphanumeric text, but it could be anything inside of there. So as you're working with these different data types, strings are by far the most, quote, universal, meaning that I can have numbers inside of here. So for example, this is 11, and this would be considered an integer. This is also 11, and it's considered a string. Why? Because I have those single quotes around it. Now, this will come in important when we try converting between different data types, or depending on what you're bringing in, you may not have the exact string. So as it's saying here, if I put this in and I forget a quote, you may get an error that looks like this: EOL while scanning the string literal. This means that you forgot that single quote somewhere and you'll have to dissect the code. The great thing about Python is when you make a mistake, it's going to tell you what line number you messed up on, where to go look, pretty much as to where the code couldn't be executed, unlike several other languages that most people are used to. You can have such thing as an empty string, which means it's just 2 quotes. This is typically used as a placeholder when you're setting variables later on, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But you can have a such thing as an empty string. You obviously can't have an empty integer or a float point because those are the numbers themselves. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is string concatenation and replication. You'll want to understand the difference between these two. So string concatenation is a way of taking 2 strings and combining them into one string, joining them together. So for example, as they describe here, if I have a string called Alice and I have a string called Bob, if I hit enter and I got this plus sign in between here, it's going to put me back together as Alice Bob. Now notice Alice and Bob got combined directly and there's no space in between there. So if I wanted to actually have a space in there, I'd have to do something like Alice plus with a space in between this string. Now notice this isn't an empty string because I have a space in between it. So that white space is actually going to mean something. and then I have Bob inside of here. Now, when I've concatenated 3 different strings together, I now get that space in between. You could also put the space after Alice. You could put the space before Bob. However, you're going to run into issues if you do either one of those two later on, if you're trying to clean up those inputs and such. So right now, if you want to combine a bunch of different strings, you use what's called string concatenation, which is this plus sign. Don't confuse that with a math operator of addition. It's not addition here. This, when you're using strings, is called string concatenation. If I'm using the plus sign with a bunch of integers, I'm doing math at this point. For example, in homework 1, some people will think that they're using the plus sign with strings, and you're not. That's string concatenation. All right. So in this one here, you cannot concatenate strings and integers. So for example, if I have Alice and I say 42, which is just an integer, I'm always going to get an error like this. Notice it tells me what line it is. Now this is line 1 because this is the beginning of my script here. And it says I can only concatenate strings, not integers. So if I want to convert this 42 to an integer, I have to use a conversion process. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. For string replication, that is where I would use the multiple sign, but it's going to give me multiples of whatever string I had. So for example, if I have Alice and I use the multiplication times 5, this is going to give me Alice 5 times. So Alice, 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 Alice. You cannot do this with a floating type. You must do it with an integer inside of here. You cannot do string replication with 2 strings. So it must be done with a string and an integer on this side. A lot of people don't understand where you would ever use this. It will come in handy later. It's a way of cleaning up your code. So say you wanted to print a fancy menu screen or something like that. You can shorthand some stuff by doing something like print, and we'll talk more about the print statement, et cetera, here in a little bit. But we could say something like print and then the pound sign, and we're going to say that times 50. And you'll notice I immediately get 50 of these pound signs or hashtags. That is in terms of me actually hitting the hashtag symbol up here 50 times to print that out. So it's a nice way to shorthand if you're going to be replicating the same thing on the screen over and over and over. You can use string replication in order to do that. Anybody have any questions so far? Please don't be afraid to come off and ask questions.
Is there a difference between using that Alice times 5 and the print times 50? Or they do the same thing?
In the interactive shell, they'll do the same thing. It's going to notice how this looks the same, right? When we actually start writing assignments, which is what you will do here in the file new, if I try to do Alice times 50, or Alice times 5 rather, and then I'm going to run this. So I hit run. It's going to ask you to save your code. You always have to save it first. Again, create a folder somewhere and save your code. I'm just going to do a quick example here. Maybe. Well, hopefully I didn't lock up with everybody in there. Can you guys still hear me in here?
Yeah.
Okay. Not sure why that decided to crash. Pull up another one here. So if I would go to try to run this, save it, please give me a box here, maybe. Evidently, my Explorer is going to crash in the middle of a call. Great. Let's try this again here. All right, so we had something like Alice times 5. And if we go to run this code, it's still not going to give me a prompt box. Must have something messed up with Explorer when I did that install. We'll do that recording again here in a little bit. So what the difference is you're in the interactive shell with idle here, which means you're going to get immediate response. So it's like having a one-line script, if that makes sense. It's a way for you to test and do different variables, et cetera, inside of here. If you actually want to create a script file and then you run that file, that is where you're going to do the whole new file. You would have to, so you could do Alice times 5, but nothing's going to show up on the screen out here in idle. Nothing's going to show up out here when it actually runs your code because there's nothing to print that to the screen. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about print in just a little bit. Let me go ahead and pause this recording so I can clean up that file explorer, and then I'll be right back. So it looks like I'm having issues with File Explorer. I'll go ahead and end this recording here for today. We will meet on Friday of this week because we didn't have class on Monday. So I want to make sure you guys have everything that you need for the homework assignment. So we will meet on Friday. It will be a shortened version of it. We won't meet for the full 50 minutes. It'll be a short meeting. We'll go over the next portion of this that you guys need to know for the homework assignment, and then we'll go ahead and get you guys started on the homework assignment. Does anybody have any questions inside of here? All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.